All right. Um, Welcome everybody to the Memphis Horticultural Society's meeting presentation with Dr. Alan Owings. Alan is a professor emeritus of horticulture at the LSU AgCenter. And during his 26 years with LSU, he provided statewide extension service expertise to nursery growers, landscapers, garden centers, master gardeners, home gardeners, and probably people who stopped him in parking lots. We know how that goes, don't we? These days, Alan's a senior horticulturist at Bracy's Nursery and Clegg's Nursery in Southern Louisiana, where he works in education outreach, social media, and new plant production, which sounds like a very interesting line of work. His list of other credentials and experiences is lengthy, but they include stints as president of the Louisiana chapter of the Azalea Society of America, president of the Louisiana State Horticulture Society, and the Gulf District Director for the American Rose Society, among many others. Alan is a native plant of Hammond, Louisiana, and it should surprise no one that in his off-duty hours, he enjoys gardening, golfing, and supporting LSU sports. So Alan, let me hand it over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank y'all. Good evening. Can everybody hear well? Are we good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's really good to be zooming with you all this evening at the Memphis Horticultural Society, and appreciate being here and kind of the new world of the last 18 months that we're living in has all these online presentations going, and it's taught us some new technology and taught us some new ways to meet people and taught us some new ways to get information out. And I do look forward to returning in person to more events as we move forward. But there has been a lot of craziness going on in the horticulture world in the last 18 months or so, and in the last few years, there's been a lot of new plants enter the market and a lot of things going on in that regard, as it has been over the last 20 or 30 years. So we're going to go over some of the things we saw at retail, some of the things we saw in the wholesale growing industry over the last 18 months, and then look at some of the new plants. So I'm at Bracy's Nursery in Amite, and that is a wholesale nursery. And we sell to independent retail garden centers in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the Florida Panhandle. So we sell in a pretty large geographical area, and almost all of the independent retail garden centers in the Memphis metropolitan area buy from Bracy's Nursery. And then I also work a little bit with social media at Clegg's Nursery in Baton Rouge, which is 4 independent retail garden centers that's open year round in Baton Rouge. So what's happened in the horticulture industry, especially in the nursery, landscape, garden center industry, since COVID started? Well, we all know COVID started in early spring of 2020, and Louisiana was kind of early with COVID after New York. COVID got started in Louisiana with Mardi Gras in late February of 2020. And then, of course, all the states started imposing some stay-at-home orders. I think ours was March the 22nd or 23rd, and it wasn't really clear whether garden centers could stay open. Eventually, they were allowed to stay open, and then curbside pickup became something that went on for a good while, and it took a little bit of time to get adjusted to it, but it seemed to work well for most garden centers. People started coming to the garden centers once they realized garden centers were open, and they started buying fruit plants and vegetable plants and even ornamental plants. Some areas of the South, especially in Texas, had a little bit of more stringent restrictions on whether garden centers could be open or not. Some of them could not be open. Some could be open but only offer curbside. Some could be open and have curbside and in-person shopping if you were socially distanced and had masks. And so all those things had to be adjusted for. But when people stay home and they're not eating at restaurants and they're not going on vacation, they garden, they do home improvements, they buy plants, they refresh their landscape, and that is definitely what we saw. And then on the vegetable side of things, when people started coming in last spring and buying their vegetables, they were buying their seed, but then they started buying seed of the cool season crops that they would be planting last fall. So there were seed shortages last year. There's still seed shortages this year with all of the national companies. If you all order seed from catalogs, you probably notice that you get some of your seed on your order and some of your seed are back ordered and some of your seed are substitute, or maybe you didn't get them at all. It just varies from one company to another. And then one thing that became apparent after we were a month or two into the COVID lockdown was that, garden centers were even busier than they were pre-COVID, and it was just phenomenal the amount of people that were going to garden centers. So what happened? Well, we always want new gardeners. Most of the surveys have shown in the last 18 months that there's anywhere from 16 to 19 million new gardeners in the United States, people who have not gardened before. Some people say we're not going to retain, but maybe a quarter to 1/3 of those people. Most people think that who know this kind of marketing research say we may be able to retain 50 or 2/3 or 75% of these folks. So that's very encouraging for the horticulture industry. COVID craziness resulted in excellent sales, huge demand, plant shortages. We've been preaching for a long time that horticulture is essential, and it was even more so in 2020. And then in 2020, summer's not the busy time at garden centers, but June, July, and August were busy. And even this year, June and July and August were busy. So we're seeing more year-round buying of plants and more year-round gardening activity than what we've seen prior. Is this going to last? We really don't know, but I think it will last to some degree. And then you had things like garden mums last fall. Garden mums have been kind of stagnant on sales the last 5 to 10 years, but last year they sold like crazy. Down in Louisiana, All Saints Day, which was yesterday, November 1st, people buy garden mums for the cemeteries or buy florist mums for the cemetery. But garden mums have not been lasting at retail beyond late September. One grower in Mississippi last year grew 70,000 mums, and that usually carries him through November 1st, and he was sold out by October 1st. This year, he grew 75,000, and he was sold out September the 28th. So the mum sales have been ridiculous. And then squash and pumpkins and gourds and all the garden centers are doing all these fall displays now in September, October, and pumpkin sales last year and this year have basically doubled or tripled from what they were in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. Fruit trees, fruit bushes, shrubs, irrigation supplies, metal edging for landscape beds. All of these were in short supply last year. It's a little bit better right now. People were buying media and soil and pine straw and building new landscape beds last year and this year, and that kind of increased the demand for all of those products. And then when you get to the wholesale growers, Um, Plants were being sold from the grower before they were ready, just because of the huge demand. And then, growers have a crop that's planned for spring of 2021, but they were selling that crop in the fall of 2020 because they were good enough quality and people wanted them. And now the same thing is happening this year. And then when you look at the whole economy, the last 18 months or so, I went to Academy Sports a few times last spring and last summer. Fishing supplies, guns, ammunition, barbecue grills were in short supply. Everything was sold out. Bicycles, people were outdoor exercising and doing recreation. Lawnmowers, tractors, vehicle manufacturing, all the home improvement stores and paint stores and appliance stores have been doing very good. And from what I understand, you have to wait now to get some appliances for your home if you're renovating. So that was all the COVID situation. And then I'm not sure how cold you all got in Memphis, but I know y'all got pretty brutally cold. And we had what I call the slobber knocker frozen tundra Arctic polar express blast. And this was for about 5 days in February. Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, some of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the northern parts, the Memphis area, and Tennessee. A lot of plants were damaged by the cold weather. This created another demand for plants on top of the COVID demand for plants. So, and then when you really think about it and look around those states and see all the cold damaged plants that are still there, it's going to take 3 and 4 years to restock and replant all these plants that were damaged. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Our nursery growing area in Forest Hill, which is not where Bracy's is. Forest Hill is more in central Louisiana. Bracy's had really very little damage from cold, but it was much colder in Forest Hill, and they lost about 20% of their crops there. They had 2 hurricanes prior to that, so but they've rebounded fairly well. And Texas, Texas is so big, it's like a whole nother country, and there's major nursery crop damage in Texas. But it's been 30, 35 years since we've had a winter weather event that killed the number of plants that the winter weather event this February of 2021 killed. Indian hawthorns, loropetalums, pittosporums, oleander, bottlebrush, sweet olives, waxleaf ligustrum. So these are just some of the plants that were damaged, and I imagine you all saw some of this in the Memphis area. And some of these plants wound up, coming back from the base or coming back to some degree. Some people just going and took these plants out because they were significantly damaged and they didn't want to wait for the regrowth to occur. So it just varies from one geographical area to another, and looking at microclimate, age of the plant, health of the plant, all of that played a role. But there's huge demand for plants right now. Tropical plants were damaged. Bracy's nursery, we sold about $1 million of tropical plants this year to replace plants. So that was ridiculously more than we normally sell. The 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, the college students, the folks who are entering the workforce now, they are coming to the garden centers for house plants and succulents and foliage, and they're very interested and looking forward to gardening and are doing these kind of things. When the men come into the garden center, they go to the vegetable tables and to the herbicide and fertilizer section. When the young folks go in, they go to the succulent tables, the foliage plant table, the house plant table. When the middle age female consumer goes in, they go to the bedding plant section. It's really interesting to see traffic in a garden center and who goes where. So I really shouldn't be smiling in this photo, but this is a dead loropetalum at my brother's house in Longview, Texas, and It's graveyard dead, y'all. I mean, and just think how many loropetalums have been planted in the last 25 years when they first started to be popular, and how many are damaged over in the Mid-South area right now. There's a lot of plants that have to be replaced. This is at a hotel in Shreveport, Louisiana, Sweet Olive, and the globe plant there is a wax leaf ligustrum. So there's a lot of damage out there. So what's going on in the green industry? I know most of y'all are probably home gardeners, but we may have some green industry folks with us tonight. But the recession about 12 years ago was hard on the industry. We lost growers and garden centers. But in the last 15 years or so, the growers, there's fewer growers, but they're bigger. They have more acreage. And there's a whole lot more landscape companies now than what there was 15 years ago. Wholesale nursery sales have been very good the last 3 years. At Bracy's, these are crazy numbers. In 2020, our sales were up 21%. And then this year, our sales are up 31%. So basically, we've gone up in sales 50% since 2019, and that you can't plan for that kind of a rapid increase. So the plant shortage is real right now. And then as far as the landscapers, 46% of landscapers across the South have their sales up significantly. Just finding labor is the main problem for landscape companies. And Charlie Hall at Texas A&M, he's a green industry economist, and he says when people buy cars and appliances, they spend less on plants and gardening. Right now, people are still buying all of these things, but what's going to happen in a few years is the gardening and the plant sales going to be as good as what they are right now? Probably not, but we hope we can at least sustain some growth. Right now, the trucking situation is a difficult thing that we're having to deal with. Amazon and other mail order companies are decreasing the demand for an in-person retail shop, although there's not that many plants sold by mail, but it sure is increasing from what it was at one time. Labor is a major problem. In the United States, we could hire 9 million people to satisfy the demands of the green industry. So that's how many short the workers we are. And that's just an incredible number. And this is mostly landscape, and even those companies that just mow and blow and go, they could hire many more workers, and the workers aren't out there, it seems like. Costs of being in business up 11% from 19 to 20, and I don't have the number for 20 to 21 yet. So how good was retail last year and this year? Really this year. So the states that have red there on a basis of 1 to 10, retail garden center sales. So you see a lot of 8s and 9s all across the South. Basically, how good are sales on the weekend at your garden center? Arkansas didn't have enough garden centers reporting. That's why it's still in white, but you can see Tennessee, the Carolinas, Alabama, Georgia reported an 8 for the spring, and then Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma reported a 9. But then they also do what's called a gut rating. And when you get to the gut rating, you see all these 10s. So really, how crazy was spring? How good was sales? And you can see all across the Mid-South there, it was 10. Texas was 9, basically because there wasn't enough plants to meet demand in Texas. Garden centers could not get enough plants to meet the demand. That's why it's a little bit a lower score there. So you can see it was very good for Memphis and all the surrounding cities and states. Okay, so now let's get into some plants. And I think most of you all are probably familiar with some of these plant varieties. Of course, knockout and drift roses. I'm not sure how widespread rose rosette disease is in Memphis, but I know y'all have it. So roses are still selling at record paces. There's a lot of loropetalum varieties on the market: Ever Red, Crimson Fire, Purple Diamond, Purple Daydream. People are looking for smaller growing loropetalums. Purple Daydream is the one you want to plant that has a smaller habit. Loropetalums get bigger than they're advertised to get, and they do have to be pruned occasionally to keep them under a size that people want, because they buy one and they think it's going to get 3 to 4 feet, and then rapidly it gets to 5 or 6 feet. Y'all may not know about Distillium. There's not a good common name for Distillium. It's also called Itsu plant, ITSU, Itsu, ITSU plant, but we just call them Distilliums. Those are the 5 main varieties that are out there. A good substitute for Indian hawthorn, a great foundation plant, and I will show you some pictures of Distilliums. All the Encore Azaleas, wintergreen boxwoods, Shishi, Gashera, camellias. You all can get cold damage in Tennessee on Camellias sasanquas and Camellia japonicas, but I imagine 3 years out of 4, your shishis are okay with the cold. I'm not really sure. Frostproof gardenia. Frostproof is one of the more cold hardy gardenias, and y'all can probably do those in Memphis, but when you get up to Jackson, Tennessee, where the Tennessee Research Station is, they get more cold damage on them up there. Y'all are in good hydrangea territory. The endless summer hydrangeas are great. The Hydrangea Paniculatas are good, the ones that do better in sun, and they flower on new growth as opposed to part shade or part sun or shade, and the varieties that flower on their old wood. And then Sunshine Ligustrums is the yellow foliage, non-flowering, non-seeding privet that y'all are seeing out there. And it's just amazing the number of those plants that are being sold, and I just can't believe so many of those are sold. I do like them, but they do need to be hedged and pruned and shaped a couple of times a year to keep them tidy looking. And then abelias are always very popular. Abelias really have nice flowers, and there's a lot of varieties there, and they're really great for pollinators. The butterflies and hummingbirds use kaleidoscope and other abelias for nectar from the flowers. So this is what a young crop of Distilliums look like. Now these do flower, but the flowers are on the stem toward the inside of the plant, and they're red, so you really don't notice them a whole lot. This is more of a dwarf yaupon, juniper, cherry laurel, Indian hawthorn substitute plant. Most of them are 3 to 4 feet. A linebacker is the one for a screen, and it gets about 10 feet tall. Coppertone gets about 5 feet tall, and then the other 3 are more 3 to 4 footers. I like Cinnamon Girl, and I like Swing Low. This is Cinnamon Girl in the picture, and Vintage Jade is a little wild and crazy growing, so I'm kind of gravitating away from Vintage Jade, and I'm using Cinnamon Girl and Swing Low, and those are decently available at the garden centers in Memphis, from what I understand. A Swing Low is probably the smallest, and you can see in Cinnamon Girl there, you don't have many branches down close to the ground. They kind of branch more up in the canopy, and there on Swing Low, you have branches near the soil line, so you have a plant that fills in down at the base, whereas Cinnamon Girl doesn't fill in at the base as good as Swing Low does. So these are full sun plants, no insect issues, no disease issues. There was some cold damage on them. They're supposed to be good through zone 7A, but they did get some cold damage in Memphis and in Arkansas in February. but I think most are coming back pretty well. And then there's two new Distiliums in the Southern Living Plant Collection. This is cast in bronze. Cast in bronze is similar to the copper tone variety. And it has kind of a bronzy, maroonish new color to the growth flushes. And then the one that is really going to be the one of the future is Jewel Box. And Jewel Box was developed by Buddy Lee, who was a gentleman in Louisiana who developed Encore Azaleas. And Jewel Box is the most dwarf growing of the Distilium, and it's new 2021 in the Southern Living Plant Collection. And we just sold our first crop of Jewel Box at Bracy's in the last couple of months. So you're looking at a 3-foot plant, and the foliage texture is smaller than on Cinnamon Girl. And this is the best blooming of the Distilium. This is a very, very good bloomer, and you do see the blooms on a Jewel Box Distilium. Roses, the knockout rose people keep coming out with more varieties. What they're working on right now is a knockout that's going to stay small. So truly, you all, this is going to be a dwarf knockout. It's called Petite, and it's available in the red. And the petal count's pretty good. The blooms last forever. It doesn't have a whole lot of vigor to it because it's dwarf. I'm seeing it used mostly in containers. Works really well in containers. It'll work well in landscape beds too, but I'm finding most people, it doesn't grow fast enough to satisfy them. So as long as you know what you're getting when you plant Petite, I think you'll be liking it. And of course, this is the first introduction in the Petite series of knockouts. So I imagine in 3 or 4 years, we're going to have a Petite pink, and we'll have some other colors in the Petite knockouts. But these have the good black spot resistance to them that the original knockouts have. And then when you get into the Drift Series roses, which I think y'all are using a good bit in Memphis, and I'm not sure what the rose rosette situation is, like I said earlier. But the thing about the drifts is they're 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 foot growers, and a lot of these have nicely fragrant blooms. Apricot, peach, popcorn, white, and sweet all have fragrant flowers. Red, coral, pink, and lemon, the flowers are not very fragrant on them. I'm really liking the peach and the popcorn and the white, and the sweet is a double pink. Instead of calling it double pink, they called it sweet. Coral and red and pink are the most sold, but a lot of folks are kind of matriculating toward these fragrant drift roses right now. So these are basically, some people call them a smaller growing knockout. They're not really that, but they do have smaller foliage and a smaller habit, and they still give you, 5 bloom cycles a year from March till Thanksgiving or so. And then Prunia roses in February, mid to late February, early March in Memphis, and then you may want to give them a little bit of a pruning in late August, Labor Day, to get you and encourage a fall flower show. Okay, now one thing you may see on drift roses is one variety may have flowers that's not characteristic of that variety. So here is popcorn drift on the left, and it's got branches in it that have peach blooms. So how does that happen? Well, popcorn drift originated as a flowering sport of peach. So there were some peach drift roses out there, and a branch sported popcorn. They propagated that branch and created popcorn drift. But now you have some plantings of popcorn drift when you plant in mass, where you see a cane or two producing peach flowers. So they're kind of reverting on them. And that's the same thing happened with the sweet and the white, because the white sported from the sweet, and now you see white drift occasionally with some sweet or double pink flowers. So some people don't mind this, but I kind of want my white drifts to stay white and my popcorn drifts to stay peach. So you got to go in here and prune these sports out occasionally to maintain the quality of the plant or the true characteristic of the plant that you bought. New in 2022 is going to be blushing drift. So there's going to be 10 different drift roses out on the market after this one is released, and this has the rosy pink double flowers. Spirea does good for you all in Memphis, and I imagine some of you all have seen the candy corn spirea at your garden centers. Really unique foliage, looks good year round, really a nice plant. And you do have some good blooming on that, on the double play candy corn spirea. And then the other double play variety that's very good is the reddish flowering doozy. And doozy also has some nice new reddish foliage flush there. So double play doozy and double play candy corn, both of those are proven winter plants. They have a lot of traction at retail right now. This is a Kaleidoscope Abelia. That's the most planted Abelia variety. So you all are probably used to that variety, and you probably see that in residential and commercial landscapes. This is another new Abelia that has white and green variegation, and it's called Radiance. I'm really liking Radiance. You just have so many Abelias and so many loropetalums and so many roses and so many hydrangeas. It's hard sometimes to pick out the variety that you really want. But Radiance Abelia is another nice grower. And Kaleidoscope puts on these shoots that kind of bypass the main body of the plant. It's almost like they're throwing a big sucker up or water sprout up in the center of the plant. And Radiance does not do that. So that's one nice attribute of Radiance, and it does keep that nice green and white bicolored foliage there, and some nice white flowers. And then another new group of Abelias is the Perfection series, and these are from Star Roses and Plants. And Peach is the one that's there in the middle. So you have Kaleidoscope and you have Radiance, and now you have Peach Perfection. Peach Perfection is in consideration to be an LSU super plant, but it has not achieved that status yet, just because there's not enough on the market yet to really promote it a whole lot. But we do have Peach Perfection growing at Bracy's now, and it has been at retail in Louisiana the last year. But just the best blooming Abelia that I've seen in woody ornamental trials in the South in the last couple of years. And it's the best one in the Perfection series. Other two varieties in the Perfection series are not as good. So Peach Perfection, just heavy bloomer, good butterfly activity, and it has that pinkish, greenish, maroonish foliage color to it. All these hardy hibiscus that are out there, the Summerifics are in the Proven Winter program. These are the head over heels. These are good for you all in the Memphis area. They usually start growing back from the ground in April, and they usually start blooming in June or July, and they go till Labor Day. And if you do some deadheading on them and grooming on them and taking off the old flowers, you can actually get some extended bloom. So these head over heels and the Summerific hardy hibiscus, and they'll grow fine in a regular landscape bed. They're very cold hardy to zone 4, zone 5. So very adaptable all across Tennessee. And you want to fertilize them every year, right when that new growth starts coming out from the old root system. Now these are Altheas. So a lot of people get all these different hibiscus, like Confederate Rose and hardy hibiscus and Altheas or Rose of Sharon's mixed up, but they're all in the hibiscus family. They're just all different species. And in some, these are the two varieties that have a columnar habit. These have been doing very well at the trial gardens at the University of Tennessee in Jackson. Your old Rose of Sharon's have a tendency to be spreading and kind of a wide canopy. These are very columnar, 8 feet tall, 3 feet wide, whereas your older Althea Rose of Sharon's would be 8 to 10 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet wide. So these are nice columnar shapes. Purple blooms a little bit longer than white does, and the bees are highly attracted to the pillar Altheas, as they are to all the Altheas. And these, of course, do best in full sun. And if you want to prune them some to control the size, you can. These are supposed to get 6 to 8 feet tall. Okay, and then I know y'all aren't the Mid-South Hydrangea Society, but look at all these Hydrangea Paniculata varieties. And this is just some of them. These are the ones that really are sold in Louisiana. But look at all the new ones in the last 5 years. So there continues to be a lot of new breeding and new selections and new releases on all of these. The one that's got some momentum and is going to start being more available is Limelight Prime. So y'all know Limelight. So Limelight Prime is 2/3 the size of Limelight, and it has stronger branching, and the flowers, the colors on the old blooms have better color in the south than the flowers on the old blooms of Limelight. So this is a picture of Limelight. That's actually Bobo. That's actually Bobo right there. But looking at these, unless you really know your Hydrangea Paniculatas, you may have a hard time differentiating one from the other. Little Lime usually starts blooming before Limelight does. You want more sun than shade on these. And something that's very overlooked and not done is people forget to fertilize these. They need fertilization every spring, right when the new growth starts. And then Little Lime Punch, that's going to be a new variety for 22, and it has more of a pink color to the lime green flowers. And then Quick Fire Fab and Firelight Tidbit are basically smaller growing versions of Firelight and Quick Fire. So just improvements in the plants. And there's another picture of a Hydrangea Paniculata field at Bracy's. And as these flowers fade in late summer, if you do some deadheading, you get fall bloom on these too. So you can get a couple of flower cycles on your Hydrangea Paniculatas. And if your Hydrangea Paniculatas get too big, you can prune those back however much you want to prune them back in the spring and not affect your current year's bloom, because they bloom on the new growth that goes on in the spring, and they start blooming in June. So you can do some height reduction pruning if you want to on these in March or April, or right after they get growing. There's a picture of Little Lime. This planting gets morning sun and afternoon shade, does very nice, and Little Lime starts blooming a week or two before a Limelight does. And Little Lime, 3 to 4 feet in Louisiana, Limelight easily 6 to 8 feet tall. I have some pictures of Limelight at Callaway Gardens in Georgia where they're about 10 feet tall. There's Limelight. One thing about Limelight is the stems are long and they can get floppy. So that's why they have Limelight Prime coming out, and you're going to reduce some of the flower head drooping that you see on Limelight. And wedding designers and florists are using these Hydrangea Paniculatas in flower arrangements for weddings. And if you have a June or July wedding, these are good to plant in the garden if you can time the bloom to be right for you. And all these paniculatas have the cone-shaped flower heads. And this is Limelight Prime right there, a little bit shorter and stronger branching. And here's Little Line Punch, so you see what that winds up doing. And it does color up like this in the south, whereas this is really not the bloom aging. It's more it's not really the blooms fading from being old. It's the process of going from lime green to blushy pink to darker pink to rose pink, and we're just now planting these at Bracy's, and we're excited about this new Little Lime edition. And then here's White Wedding, and White Wedding is about the size of a Little Lime, but it has the stronger branching like I was talking about on Limelight Prime, and it's more of a pure white as opposed to a limey green white. So if you want more of a pure white, White Wedding in the Southern Living Plant Collection, and you're looking at about a 4-foot plant on White Wedding. And then on the Endless Summer Hydrangeas, the new color in the Endless Summer Hydrangeas is Summer Crush. And this is going to be anywhere from raspberry pink to raspberry to red. If the soil is acid, you have more red flowers. If the soil is alkaline, you have more of this raspberry to raspberry pink here. So you do have the color changes on soil pH, just like you have on the pink and the blue hydrangea varieties. So you can change your pH and change your flower color on your garden hydrangeas, but it's going to take a spring and a fall application of lime or sulfur to make that pH change and change your aluminum concentration in the soil to get your flower color changes. It's not something you're going to be able to do in the short term. It's going to take 18 months or 2 years to do it. Encore Azaleas. Encore Azaleas are the most sold azaleas across the South, and of course you all know Encores, and they bloom more often. They're fall bloomers and spring bloomers, and sometimes they'll bloom in the fall for you. And down here in South Louisiana, we can have blooms on them in the winter. When we have a mild winter. So these are the two new Encores, and we sold our first crops of these this year. Autumn Majesty is the double purple, and I like that, of course, because I'm LSU and I love the purple flowers. And then Autumn Starburst, there's another similar one that has a similar pink and white bicolor striping called Sunburst. So you have Sunburst, but now you have the new Starburst. And the newer Encores that are coming out the next 3 to 5 years are going to have this bicolor flowering. So you'll have some other new ones coming out. They're going to be different colored bicolors. And don't forget about planting azaleas in the fall. Everybody buys and plants their azaleas in the spring, but a fall planting of azaleas really goes a long way. You get all those roots down through the late fall and winter. And then when the plants want to really bloom great next spring, you have all the roots down to support the flowering and the foliage growth. Fertilize your azaleas every year in the spring also, right after they finish blooming. And there's some pictures of Starburst that has some frost on it. I took that picture. And there's Autumn Majesty at a horticulture trade show that I took a picture of a year or so ago. Laura Petalums, if you're looking for a smaller growing Laura Petalum, I mentioned Purple Daydream earlier. This is another new one that's smaller growing called Cherise Charm. and it's starting to be available in the nursery trade. We're just working on our first crop of these, and it has been a very nice plant, and you really are looking at a 3 to 4 foot plant on this. So that's maybe with once a year pruning. So it's going to be more available on the market as we go through the next couple of years. And there's a purple daydream right now. That's not a good picture, and the body of the plant's kind of small there, and these plants are not ready to sell yet. But purple daydream in the Southern Living Plant Collection is another relatively new loropetalum that has a lot of traction in the loropetalum sales. But right now, if you're a wholesale grower and you have loropetalums, you're selling them just because of all the cold damaged loropetalums that are out there in the landscapes. And then there's jazz hands variegated, and there's other jazz hands too, but variegated is the one that's selling the most. And sometimes these stay variegated, and sometimes they lose some of the variegation, and that is dependent on sun. I find the ones that are planted in morning sun and get a little bit of filtered shade in the afternoon keep the variegation. I find the ones that are in sun most of the day, and especially get sun in the afternoon in the summertime, lose their variegation. So it's kind of a planting spot as to where whether your jazz hand variegated will stay variegated or not. And I have some that are about 6 or 7 years old, and they're about 5 feet tall. And then in Birmingham and Memphis and Little Rock, I'm seeing some of these other jazz hand varieties being sold, and we're growing a couple of other jazz hands now. But the jazz hands variegated is the one that you see the most often, and that's in the Proven Winter Shrub Program. A new group of Budlias that's out there. I really thought these would not do that great, and I've been pleasantly surprised. They're dwarf, they got big blooms, and they got big foliage. So most of your dwarf Budlias have small foliage and small blooms. Well, these have bigger foliage and big blooms, and they attract the pollinators like crazy, and they stay 24 inches tall or so. And I have friends all over Louisiana, Mississippi that have these planted, although they've only been out for about 4 or 5 years now, and they're doing very well. The only thing that really bothers them is wet soil conditions, and we were very wet in Louisiana this year, January to June, so we did have a few problems with them, but that's the case with all Buddleia, all butterfly bushes. They don't like wet soil. They need a well-drained bed. They need full sun for the most part. And these are not invasive in any way. There are some Budlias that seem to be invasive in the Pacific Northwest for whatever reason, but we don't have a Buddleia invasiveness issue in the southeastern or south central United States. So periwinkle, amethyst, and blue are the 3 really good ones. The white does not perform very well. And there's a new pink that's coming out in 2022. So here's a Pugster blue with one of the bumblebee species on it. If you deadhead your Buddleia, you get more flowers, of course. And here is a Pugster periwinkle, just a really nice looking plant at retail. And here's Pugster amethyst in Monroe, Louisiana, at one of my friends' houses. And then just wrapping up, I know y'all are not in Louisiana, but these are plants that would work well for you. We have a Louisiana super plant program. This is Gum Petunia, Supertunia bubblegum. I'm sure those of y'all who garden a lot and plant flowers know how good Gum Petunia is. So don't forget about that. But the Louisiana super plants for this year were the Beacon Impatiens, and the Beacon Impatiens come in 8 colors, and this is the Impatiens Downy Mildew resistant Impatiens. So 7 years ago, Downy mildew started impacting impatient plantings across the country. So there's been some new breeding done, and the Amara and the Amara, A-I-M-A-R-A, Amara, and the Beacons are the two new Impatiens that are resistant to Impatiens Downy mildew, and they're performing very, very nicely for us. Fabulous. So this is kind of returning Impatiens to the garden. Though if any of y'all are in the landscape business or use garden Impatiens, you probably know about the Impatiens Downy mildew situation. So these have been a fabulous new plant, and they're a super plant in Louisiana this year. And then some of these new vegetatively propagated sunflowers, they're continuously blooming from spring through fall, unlike your annual seeded sunflowers that just produce one flower cycle and then go to seed, and then you're basically done. This is the Sun Credible Yellow, and next year there's going to be Sun Credible Saturn. So the Sun Credible sunflowers. And then I believe Muhly Grass does okay for you all in Memphis, except for when we have a winter like we just had. But the Gulf Coast Muhly Grass is just fabulous. The older it gets, the more beautiful it gets, the more plumes you have. September, October is the main flowering time for the Muhly Grass. And a lot of your ornamental grasses like to be pruned or cut back to the ground, or you want to cut all the dead foliage off a couple of weeks before the spring foliage growth commences. You don't want to do that on Muhly. You just want to give it a very light haircut. You don't want to cut Muhly Grass down severely because it does not come back as good as Miscanthus and Panicums and some of the other ornamental grasses that we use. So keep that in mind. Full sun, and they don't really like wet soil. People think they do okay in wet soil, but they don't. So pink Muhly Grass, Gulf Coast Muhly Grass. And then we have another new petunia, the Supertunia Mini Vista Indigo. So there's Supertunias like bubblegum, and then there's Supertunia Minis. So basically the minis are the smaller version of Supertunias, and the best color in the Supertunia Minis in LSU trials is the Vista Indigo. And that's a super plant for this year also. So those are the LSU AgCenter Louisiana super plants for this year. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and a lot of information, and hopefully y'all made a few notes or found a few plants there that you liked or want to ask some questions about. And I appreciate the invitation to be with you all tonight, and hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully I can come to Memphis sometime and see you all in person, and see some of the horticulture things going on at the Botanical Garden and elsewhere. So I appreciate y'all having me, and I will hang around and take any questions and comments and visit with y'all as long as you need. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. I think a lot of people got so wrapped up in your presentation, they forgot to put questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So while I'm talking to Alan with my question, you all can add your questions in. And yes, I did see some things that I thought were pretty cool that I did make notes of. But I noticed in a lot of your slides, you had the Southern Living Collection pots, Proven Winners plots, and Encore Azaleas and all that. Mm-hmm. How is all that done? Are those just basically branding agreements, or?
Exactly. That's what we're seeing in the wholesale growing nursery garden center business now. 20 years ago, branded containers, you didn't see those at the garden centers. And now knockout roses are in their own pot. Drift roses are in their own pot. Endless summer hydrangeas are in their own pots. So we're used to at Bracy's Nursery and other nurseries, maybe 10% of the crops were in branded containers, 90% were in black pots. Now it's like 50-50. And in some nurseries, it's 60 to 70% branded containers versus 20, 30, 40% black pots. So, and of course, the price tag is higher
Right.
on those branded pots also, you know?
Right. Well, what I've noticed is the little smaller nurseries and the boutique ones tend to be almost exclusively the branded pots.
Right, right.
And then the big nurseries, like we have a couple here in town, have far fewer of that kind of thing. They do their own propagation too.
Right.
So
right.
like of a brand like Southern Living Collection, is that like a Bracy's brand name, or are you just one of several growers that produce for them?
Okay, so we're a grower for all those programs.
Okay.
So like a Southern Living and Encore Azaleas originated at Flowerwood Nursery. Flowerwood Nursery is a big nursery down here in Alabama, Florida, Georgia. And then you have the proven winter shrubs, and you have the knockouts and the drifts that belong to star roses and plants. The problem is all these national nurseries, they have their own brand of roses now. They have their own brand of hydrangeas. They have their own brand of azaleas. They have their own brand of hydrangeas. So we're being oversaturated with too many varieties of too many plants in too many different pots. And there's so many great plants that are not patented. There's no royalty. There's no special pot requirement. There's plenty of reblooming azaleas like the Encores that are not patented or branded, and they're just sold at the garden centers in a black pot. And you know, and you're looking at $10 to $15 more per plant on like a branded plant many times than you are a non-branded black pot plant.
Right. Yeah, I know from working with some friends that were doing their foundation beds and stuff, and they wanted the Encore Azaleas, but it got real expensive really quick when you're buying, you know, a dozen of them or something. So
yes.
So
and you know, most of those 3 gallons, you know, you're looking at $29.99, $34.99, $39.99. You know,
40.
It adds up fast.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you know, we do see the ads in the magazines, you know, the Southern Living, and it'll show some pretty little plant and you think, oh, that's different, you know. And so often they're hard to find. Any tips for people when we're trying to find something like that that's heavily advertised and not showing up at the store?
Well, that's the issue too, because there's all these marketing campaigns and advertising dollars going behind all these new plants too. And some of them are being promoted before they're available for retail in decent numbers. And, you know, and you almost have to know what garden centers in your area specialize in new plants, because it seems like they go out and find them, whereas some of the other garden centers wait for there to be more availability. So it varies a whole lot. It really does.
Okay. Yeah, and that's pretty much the same as any other advertised products. You'll often see ads for some food or cereal or something, and it doesn't show up at the store, and you know, for 4 months, and you're thinking, so where is this thing? So yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. I've kind of always had been curious about that, so I appreciate getting the insight on that tonight.
Yes, sir.
We also had a question about the Beneficial Blooms program.
Okay.
You know anything new about that?
Oh, beneficial blooms. Well, yeah, I didn't mention that, but that's our pollinator plant program at Bracy's Nursery. So 3 years ago, we started a trade gallon production program where we grow about 15 varieties of plants every year that are good for pollinators. And then we sell a lot of these plants to independent retailers who are looking for, you know, something to advertise to their customers. Customers, when they come into the garden center now, one of their top questions when they're asking about flowers is which ones attract the pollinators. So, you know, we're trying to just package some varieties together that we know are good for the pollinators. So, but we're doing things like Joe Pye weed and some salvias and milkweed and plants like that.
Any specific ones I don't want to put you on the spot, but any specific ones we should be looking for?
I really like Little Joe Pye weed. It's a dwarf Joe Pye weed. I like the new white flame salvia that's very nice. It should be a perennial in the Memphis area. And then, we are doing the native orange milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, in our pollinator plant program. It's gotta find the right soil type in the landscape though to perennialize. So that's some of the varieties that have been really popular for us the last couple of years.
Okay. And are those, did you say those tend to be at the big box stores or at the nurseries?
No, they're at the independent retail garden centers.
Okay.
That Beneficial Blooms is a Bracy's brand, and Bracy's Nursery sells to landscapers and independent garden centers. We don't sell to Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart.
You don't sell anything to them, or just the Beneficial?
No, we don't sell anything to them.
Okay.
Just independent retailers. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's anything, and I don't know if there's anything you can do about this, but someone mentioned they have a hard time finding the sugar baby dwarf Forsythia.
Sugar baby dwarf Forsythia. Is that in the Proven Winter program? And see, y'all are in more Forsythia country than I am down here.
Yeah.
If Millstone in Germantown doesn't have it, I'm not sure who in Memphis would have it.
Okay. Yeah. So
unless that's a plant Jason sells that the UT sells in Jackson, that may be a possibility.
I don't know. Millstone is one of those boutique nurseries that I was talking about. Right. Okay. Trying to see, mostly just a lot of thanks for the interesting talk and the insight, more so than specific questions. So I
say we had 42 people.
Yeah, we had a good turnout, and as I anticipated, this kind of topic really does appeal to people, and I do hope that we'll be able to get you up here soon again in the future, once we went back in person, because I think more people enjoy that a lot more. And I think also it does stir more questions, because I think with the Zoom sessions, people do get kind of focused on the presentation. So
sure.
So, okay, well, I'm going to just say thank you very much for your presentation. Everyone, like I said, lots of people said they enjoyed it and everything. So, and I know I did. I made some notes. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you very much, sir. And we're going to stop the recording, but we do have some announcements.